while you were sleeping, the battle over the State of the Union took a dramatic turn. The president has conceded to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. He now says he will not deliver the State of the Union address until the government shutdown is over, after Nancy Pelosi had disinvited him. The president tweeting, quote, "As the shutdown was going on, Nancy Pelosi asked me to give the State of the Union address. I agreed. She then changed her mind because of the shutdown, suggesting a later date. This is her prerogative. I will do the address when the shutdown is over. I am not looking for an alternative venue for the State of the Union address because there is no venue that can compete with the history, tradition, and importance of the House chamber. I look forward to giving a great State of the Union address in the near future."
It was a solid read.
Thank you.
All right, sources tell CNN the White House was caught off guard by Speaker Pelosi's move to revoke his invitation, and the president is increasingly mystified. His tactics have failed to turn the tables on Democrats. As this is going on, 800,000 federal workers, they will miss a second paycheck this week. Two measures to end the shutdown. They will go up for a vote in the Senate, but they are expected to fail today. Joining us now, Dana Bash, CNN chief political correspondent, Crystal Ball, president of the People's House Project, and Joshua Green, CNN political analyst and national correspondent for Bloomberg Businessweek. Dana, I want to know what changed. Yesterday, the president called in the White House press pool to say, "I'm looking for an alternative location," to threaten Nancy Pelosi. And then last night, while we were all sleeping, for some reason, he caved.
Yes. I mean, what we're hearing from the White House, I heard from a source I know, or Abby Phillip heard as well, is that he is telling his advisors, and was last night, "I don't want to do this anywhere else. I want to do it in the House chamber where it's supposed to happen." That might be part of the reason, but there are obviously so many factors here. First of all, they're seeing the poll numbers at the White House. They understand that this is not good for the president, for his approval rating generally, and of course his approval rating on this issue is so much lower than Nancy Pelosi's. That matters to the president. And also, it's been going on a long time. And there was a sense, listening to people like James Clyburn, who I know you're going to have on later this hour, talking about a potential new Democratic package in the House, that maybe that was an opening and maybe things can cool for, I don't know, a few hours while the Senate takes these show votes, that's what they are going to be later today. They're going to get that out of their system and hope that maybe compromise can start to happen.
Crystal, when I read this tweet from the president, and as we know, sometimes these things are ghostwritten by one of his staff, and this did not seem to follow his usual voice or syntax. However, the message stands. I mean, it's hard to imagine that somebody would have snuck in and grabbed Twitter away from him, wrestled Twitter away from him, and written it. And I just think it's notable. I think it's notable that he gave up the fight in the middle of the fight. I think that we haven't seen often. And the tone of this is her prerogative, he says. There's no nasty Nancy nickname that he has given to so many other people. I just think that we just need to pause for a moment and recognize there's some dynamic between Nancy Pelosi and President Trump that is different than the mold.
That is going to be fascinating to watch unfold. But yeah, I mean, what's notable here is he actually made a good and presidential decision. He's absolutely right that trying to do the State of the Union somewhere else or knocking on the door and being rejected or whatever was going to be a mess, because the reality is this president lost the shutdown fight before it ever happened, when he had everybody in the Oval Office and said, "I will take credit for the shutdown. I would be proud to shut down the government for border security." In that moment, the fight was over, and it is not salvageable for him. The other thing I would say here is welcome to divided government. For the first time, Democrats can't just go up and complain and whine. They actually have some power. And I think the president, for the first time, is wrapping his head around exactly what that means.
Can I say one quick thing? Not just power, but a powerful person who wields the power in a very direct and specific way. And I think that's why my understanding, in talking to people around the president for some time, is that that's why Nancy Pelosi doesn't so far have a nickname. He respects money and he respects power and being able to wield power. And on this, I mean, she might have the first, but the second is really what's getting her his attention.
If you look at this fight over the State of the Union address, that is a fight that Nancy Pelosi herself orchestrated and then won. I mean, what is that if not a clear display of power? She sent a note to Trump saying, "Hey, maybe you want to rethink this." Trump said, "No, I'm going to come," and she slapped it down and said, "No, you're not going to come." and forced him to back down. I mean, that's a real display of power that I think you can understand and expect.
Crystal brought up the point where the president owned the shutdown. That may have been a high point for him in this battle because, and Josh, you've written about this, there are startling new economic numbers. They're startling security realities for the 800,000 federal workers out there. But Kevin Hassett, the White House chief economist, told Poppy Harlow we could see 0% growth this quarter. At Bloomberg Businessweek, this is the kind of stuff you care about deeply.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote in the cover story this week, we went around and polled economists. Hassett came out, said we could zero out growth. And it is clear if this shutdown goes on, there could be and eventually there will be a recession. So it has to rectify itself. The problem is there are two things different about this shutdown than past ones. Number one, it's the first one engineered by the president himself.
Right.
That actually gives him a lot of power to mitigate the damage to people, right? He sent all these IRS workers back to work so that the middle class doesn't revolt when they don't get their tax refunds. He's kept TSA workers on the job to the extent that he can. But what that means is the government has stayed shut and the economic damage has continued to compound to a really scary point. If this thing doesn't get settled in the next few weeks, there's going to be real fallout that's going to be felt throughout the economy.
And if I could just add on to that, I mean, there's reporting that Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, whatever that means, is going around trying to assess, what programs are going to be impacted here.
If it goes on for months, by the way, the deadline is through April, yeah.
And the reality is, look, you have TSA workers, you have correctional officers, you have Border Patrol agents, you have people who cannot go that long without a paycheck. They're going to up and get another job. Already the head of the flight attendants union is calling for a general strike. I mean, there is no way this lasts till April because it's already a crisis. It will be absolute catastrophe. Airports shut down, and potentially really the end of this presidency. More dangerous to him than the Mueller probe or anything else is how this shutdown is resolved at this point.
So what's your reporting, Dana, on what happens today? Because between the tweet, between the state, now not having to worry about the window dressing of the State of the Union, it feels like maybe there's a détente. There's something
cracks
happening.
In that glacier. Yeah, it could be. In traditional times, which we are not in right now, but in traditional times, when there is a standoff, the show votes, and I keep calling them that because that's what they are today in the U.S. Senate, are the icebreakers. They let members get off steam. They let them get on the record, even more importantly, for their supporters and for their constituents of where they really are. In this case, Republicans are going to be supportive of the president's plan. Democrats are going to be supportive of border security, reopening the government, no wall. Then they can roll up their sleeves and get down to business. And that might be the case today because of the fact that while the Senate is doing their thing, the House is not going to have any more votes this week. But they do have a proposal in the works to try to reignite these compromise talks. A lot more money than they have proposed on border security. Nothing for the wall, but things that the president does like, which the hope is will at least start the conversation again, which hasn't happened for weeks.
Yeah.
Josh, if I can change the subject wildly for a second here. I seem to remember that the first part of your book, like the opening scene, is Kellyanne Conway leaking, correct?
It actually is. The opening anecdote, Devil's Bargain, is Kellyanne Conway leaking, which has suddenly come back into the news.
Okay, it's come back into the news because Cliff Sims, who has worked in the White House, or left the White House, has a book coming out next week called Team of Vipers, and dribs and drabs are being released over time. And he really goes after Kellyanne Conway, calls her a leaker, but among other things, depicts her as literally a cartoon villain in the White House. This is what he says. She was a cartoon villain, brought to life. Her agenda, which was her survival over all others, including the president, became more and more transparent. She seemed to be perennially cloaked in an invisible fur coat, casting an all-knowing smile as if she collected 98 Dalmatians with only 3 more to go. It's vivid imagery. It's incredibly harsh. But what's the point? Is there a bigger picture here other than just the normal backstabbing we see in a White House staff?
Well, what was interesting to me is that, this White House, more than any in my lifetime, is notorious for leaking. There are all sorts of people who leak. You've had people pushed out of the administration, people like Steve Bannon, for leaking. Kellyanne Conway so far has not been. I mean, what's so shocking about this book and this Vanity Fair excerpt is Cliff Sims brings the receipts. He describes a scene where he's on her laptop watching her text in real time, and leak against Trump and Bannon and Kushner and various members of the administration. So it presents a very vivid firsthand portrait of how the sausage is made, in Washington, in this White House, in a way that we haven't seen before on the record from White House sources.
And so the question is, how has she survived for so long? She has survived. She's a survivor, and I think that he gets to the heart of it when he says her agenda, which was her survival over all others, including the president. So she's very canny, as we know. But why does the president allow leaks from her?
They have a very, very strong relationship. Now, that has not stopped other people from getting the boot who have strong relationships with the president, but theirs is special and different for a lot of reasons. Just the most obvious is that she is the ultimate fighter. She goes out and she will fight with you and with me and all of us for and about the president of the United States on television. We can underscore enough. He is a cable watcher. He is all about what is said on his behalf on television, and she does it from his perspective better than anybody.